The Lemonade War, Chapter 7, is called Location, Location, Location. The word location is a noun. It's a real estate term that refers to the position of the piece of real estate as it relates to the value of the real estate. So that's our chapter for this week. Evan was in trouble. So far, he'd earned $47.11, which was more money than he'd ever had in his whole life. But today was Friday, and there were only 3 days left. 3 days to beat Jesse. He needed to earn almost $53 to win the bet. And that meant that each day he'd have to earn, well, Evan tried to do the math in his head. 43 divided by 3. His brain spun around like a top. He didn't even know where to begin. He went to his desk and pulled out a piece of paper, his basketball schedule from last winter, and flipped it over to the back. He found the stub of a pencil in his bottom desk drawer, and on the paper he wrote 53 divided by 3 equals. He stared and he stared at the equation on the page. The number 53 was just so big. He didn't even know what to do with it. Jesse would know how, he muttered, scribbling hard on the page. Jesse could do long division. Jesse had her multiplication facts memorized, all the way up to 14 times 14. Jesse would look at the problem like this and just do it in her head. Stop. Snap. Evan felt his mouth getting tight, his fingers gripping the pencil too hard as he scribbled the dark storm cloud on the page. His math papers from school were always covered with X's. Nobody else got as many X's as he did. Nobody. Draw a picture. Mrs. DeFazio's voice floated around in his head. She always reminded him to draw a picture when he couldn't figure out how to start a math problem. But a picture of what? He asked again in his own head. Anything came up as the answer. Anything? Yes, anything, as long as there are 53 of them. Dollar signs. Evan decided to draw dollar signs. He started to draw 3 rows of dollar signs. 1, 2, 3. He counted as he drew. 4, 5, 6. He drew this. By the time he reached 53, his page looked like this. There were 17 dollar signs in each row, and those 2 extra dollar signs left over. Then, so Evan decided to draw a ring around those as the 2 extras, like this. $17 signs and 2 left over. Evan stared at the picture for a long time. Then he wrote Friday next to the first row, Saturday next to the second row, and Sunday next to the third row. Friday, Saturday, Sunday. Evan looked at the picture. It started to make sense to him. He needed to make $17 on Friday, 17 more on Saturday, and $17 on Sunday, and somewhere along those 3 days, he needed to make 2 extra bucks in order to earn $53 by Sunday evening. Evan felt his heart jump in his chest. He had done it. He had figured it out, that 53 divided by 3. That was a 4th grade math problem. That was 4th grade. And he hadn't even started 4th grade. And no one had helped him. Not Mom, not Grandma, not Jesse. He'd done it all by himself. It was like shooting the winning basket in double overtime. He hadn't felt this good since the Lemonade War had begun. But $17 a day, how was he going to do that? Yesterday he'd made $45, but that was just because he'd had help and free supplies, all from his friends. They weren't going to want to run a lemonade stand every day, especially on the last days of summer vacation. He needed a plan, something that would just guarantee good sales. The weather was holding out, that was for sure. It was going to hit 95 degrees today, a real scorcher. People would be thirsty, all right. Evan closed his eyes and imagined a crowd of thirsty people, all waving dollar bills at him. Now, where was he going to find a lot of thirsty people with money to spend? And then all of a sudden, an idea popped into Evan's head. Yep, it was perfect. He just needed to find something with wheels to get him there. It took Evan half an hour to drag a loaded wagon to the town center, a distance he usually traveled in less than 5 minutes by bike. But once he was there, he knew it was worth it. It was lunchtime, and the shaded benches on the town green were filled with people sprawling in the heat. Workers from nearby stores on their half-hour lunch breaks, moms with their kids, old people that didn't want to be cooped up in their houses all day, high school kids on skateboards. Preschoolers climbed the life-size sculptures around, children playing, ring around the rosy, dogs laying under trees, their tongues hanging out, pant, pant, pant. Evan surveyed the scene, and then he picked a spot right in the center of the green where all the paths met together. Anyone walking in the green would have to pass his stand, and who could resist a lemonade stand and cool lemonade on this hot day? But first, he wheeled his wagon off to the side, parked it halfway under a huge rhododendron bush. Then he crossed the street and walked to the Big Dipper store. The frozen air felt good on his chin as he walked in. It was like being dunked in a vat of just melted ice cream. And the smells, the mix of vanilla and chocolate and coconut and caramel and bubblegum. He looked at the tubs of ice cream all in a row, carefully protected but behind a pane of glass. The money in his pocket tingled. He had plenty of leftover money after buying 5 cans of frozen lemonade mix with his earnings from yesterday. What would it hurt to buy just 1 cone or 1 milkshake? Maybe both. Can I help you? Asked a woman behind the counter. Yeah, said Evan, and he stuck his hand in his pocket and felt all the money. Bills and coins ruffled between his fingers. Money was meant to be spent. Why not spend a little? Evan could just imagine how good ice cream would feel sliding down his throat. Creamy, sweet, like cold, delicious, golden deliciousness. He let his mind float as he gazed at the swirly buckets of ice cream. The sound of laughter brought him back to earth in a hurry, and he looked around. It was just some girls that he didn't know coming into the store, but it sounded like Megan Moriarty. Could you please tell me how much a glass of lemonade costs? $3, the woman said. Really? Said Evan. That much? How big's the cup? The woman pulled a plastic stack of cups out and held it up. It wasn't much bigger than the 8-ounce cups that Evan had in his wagon. Wow, $3? That's a lot, said Evan. Well, thanks anyways. And he started to walk out the door. Hey, said the woman, pointing to the ice cream case, I'm allowed to give you a free taste. Really? Said Evan. Then, could I taste that strawberry slam ice cream? The woman handed him a tiny pink spoon with 3 licks worth of pink ice cream on it. Evan swallowed it all in one gulp. Back outside, he got to work. First, he filled his pitchers with water from the drinking fountain. Then he stirred the mix. Then he pulled out a big blue marker and wrote on a paper, $2 per cup, best price in town. He'd barely finished setting up when the customers started lining up, and they didn't stop. For a full hour, he poured lemonade. The world is a thirsty place, he thought, as he nearly emptied his 4th pitcher of the day. And I am the lemonade king, he thought to himself. Later, Evan would think of his grandma saying, pride goeth before a fall. When Evan looked up, there was Officer Ken, his hands on his hips, looking down at him. Evan gulped. He stared at the large holstered gun strapped to the officer's belt. Hello, said Officer Ken, not smiling. Hi, said Evan. Officer Ken did the bike rides every year from Evan's school. He was also the cop who had shown up last fall when there was a hurt goose on the recess field. Officer Ken was always smiling. Why isn't he smiling now? Evan wondered. Do you have a permit? Asked Officer Ken. He had a very deep voice, and when he talked quietly like he did now, it really sounded deep. You mean like a bike permit? That's what the rodeo was all about at school, the bike rodeo. If they passed the rodeo, the third graders got their bike permits, which meant that they were allowed to ride their bikes to school every day. No, I mean the permit to sell food and beverages in a public space. You need a permit from the town hall, and pay the fee for that privilege. Pay the town hall to run a lemonade stand? Was he kidding? Evan looked over at Officer Ken's face. He didn't look like he was kidding. I didn't know I needed one, said Evan. Sorry, friend, said Officer Ken. I'm going to have to shut you down. It's the law. But there are lemonade stands all over town, said Evan. He thought of Jesse and Megan's lemonade stand. When he'd wheeled by his wagon more than an hour ago, their stand had looked like a beehive with small kids crowding around. And then he read the sign over the stand, free face painting, free nail polishing, free hair braiding. What a gimmick, but it sure looked like it was working. You know, said Evan, there's a stand on Damon Road right now. You should go bust them. Officer Ken now smiled. We tend to look the other way on the residential neighborhood, but right here on the town green, in the middle of all the stores, we have to enforce the law. Otherwise, we'd have someone selling something every 2 feet you look. But there had to be some way to confuse and then convince Officer Ken. How could Evan make him understand? You see, I've got this little sister, and we've got it's a competition. It's a competition going to see who can sell the most lemonade, and I've got to win because she wins. He couldn't explain the rest. About 4th grade, about how embarrassed it was going to be in the same class with his kid sister, and how it made him look like a big loser. Evan looked up at Officer Ken, and Officer Ken looked down at Evan. It was like Officer Ken was wearing a mask, a no smiling, I'm not your buddy mask. Then Officer Ken shook his head and smiled, and the mask fell off. Officer Ken said, I've got a little sister too. I love her to death now, but when we were kids. Officer Ken sucked in his breath and shook his head. Hoo-wee, he said. Then the mask came back on, and Officer Ken looked right up at Evan with a very stern 10 seconds. Tell you what, said Officer Ken, I do have to shut you down. That's the law. But before I do, I'll buy one last glass of lemonade. How's that sound? Evan's face fell. Sure, he said without enthusiasm, and he poured an extra tall cup and gave it to the policeman. Officer Ken reached into his pocket and handed Evan a $5 bill. Keep the change, he said. A contribution to the Big Brother Fund. Now clean up your things, please, and don't leave any litter behind. He lifted up his cup and a toast and walked away. Evan watched him go. Wow, he thought, I just sold the most expensive cup of lemonade in town. It was funny. 2 days ago, he would have felt as rich as a king to have that money in his hands. It was enough to buy 2 slices of pizza and soda with his friends. It was enough to rent a video game and have a late night at someone else's house. It was enough to buy a whole bag full of his favorite candy mix at the CVS store. 2 days ago, he would have been jumping for joy. Now he looked at the $5 and thought, this is nothing compared to the $100 he needed to win this war. $5 was nothing. He felt somehow that he'd been robbed of something. Maybe happiness. Maybe happiness is what he was robbed of. He should have been feeling happiness. He loaded everything from his stand into the wagon, making sure he didn't leave any scraps of litter behind. He still had a glass full of lemonade left in one of the pitchers, not to mention a whole other pitcher ready to be mixed up and unsold. So he poured himself a full cup. And then, before beginning the long, hot haul back to his house, he found an empty spot on the shaded bench and pulled his earnings out of his pockets. He counted once, he counted twice, very slowly. He had made $65. The cups and the lemonade mix had cost him $9. When he added up his earnings from Wednesday and Thursday, he had $103.11. Wow, that's enough, he thought. Chapter 8 is next.